Lisa and Jack were thrilled to move into their new home in Maplewood Heights, a quiet suburban neighborhood that looked like something out of a postcard. The streets were lined with towering oaks, and the houses had a quaint charm, each with colorful gardens and picket fences. For Lisa, it was a dream come true, a fresh start away from the city's chaos. The neighbors were welcoming. On their first day, Mrs. Caldwell from across the street brought them a batch of warm cookies, and Mr. Peterson next door offered to help with their moving boxes. Everyone seemed eager to chat, to share stories about the neighborhood, and to welcome the young couple to their new community. Everyone, that is, except for the man at the end of the street. The house at the far corner stood in stark contrast to the others. Its paint was faded, its blinds perpetually drawn, and the yard was overgrown with weeds. Lisa had noticed it right away, especially when she saw a shadowy figure peeking through the blinds as they unpacked their boxes. She waved out of politeness, but the figure quickly disappeared, leaving her with an uneasy feeling. "That's Mr. Hartman," Mrs. Caldwell explained when Lisa asked about the house. She leaned in conspiratorially, lowering her voice. "He's lived here longer than anyone, but he keeps to himself. Odd man, always has been. His wife disappeared years ago, just vanished without a trace. People say he hasn't been the same since." That evening, as Lisa and Jack settled into their new home, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. The blinds of Hartman's house seemed to shift slightly whenever she glanced over, as though the shadowy figure was tracking her movements. "Don't let it get to you," Jack said, noticing her discomfort. "Every neighborhood has a recluse. He's probably harmless." Lisa tried to take his advice, but as the days passed, strange things began to happen. At night, faint noises floated through the air, muffled thuds, the scrape of furniture being dragged, and low murmurs that didn't seem to come from any particular direction. One night, Lisa woke up to the sound of something that chilled her to the bone. A faint, high-pitched cry, like that of a child. She nudged Jack awake. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Jack listened for a moment, then shook his head. "It's probably a fox or something. Go back to sleep." But Lisa couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her ears straining to catch the faintest sound. The next morning, she found a note slipped under their front door. The handwriting was shaky, almost frantic, and the message was chilling. "Don't trust your neighbor. He's always watching." She showed the note to Jack, her hands trembling. "Who would send this?" she asked. Jack frowned, trying to appear calm. "Probably some kids playing a prank. It's nothing to worry about." But Lisa couldn't shake her growing unease. Her suspicions deepened when she saw Hartman late one night. She had been staring out the window, restless, when she spotted him dragging a large, black trash bag to the curb. It was heavy, his movements labored, and he glanced around nervously as though making sure no one was watching. The next day, Lisa couldn't stop thinking about the bag. She even considered walking over to take a look, but decided against it. Instead, she asked Mrs. Caldwell about Hartman again. "There's something strange about him," Lisa said cautiously. Mrs. Caldwell nodded. "Oh, everyone knows that. But we don't ask questions. Not after his wife disappeared. Some folks think she left him. Others, well, let's just say people around here don't like to talk about it." Lisa's unease grew with every passing day. One afternoon, she noticed something even more disturbing. Hartman's blinds, always closed, seemed to shift slightly whenever she was outside. She could feel his gaze, cold and unblinking, following her as she watered her plants or checked the mail. "I'm telling you, something's not right," Lisa insisted to Jack over dinner. "Lisa, come on," Jack said, setting down his fork. "You're obsessing. Just let it go. The guy's weird, sure, but that doesn't mean he's dangerous." But Lisa couldn't let it go. That night, as she stared out the window, she saw Hartman again. This time, he wasn't dragging a bag. He was walking toward his backyard, carrying a shovel. The sight of him moving purposefully into the darkness sent a chill down her spine. "Jack," she said, shaking him awake. "We need to find out what he's hiding." Jack groaned. "Lisa, you're being paranoid." "I'm serious," she snapped. "What if he's dangerous?" "What if?" She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Finally, Jack sighed. "Fine. Tomorrow, we'll take a look around. But no crazy stunts, okay?" Lisa nodded, her determination unwavering. Deep down, she knew she was right. There was something wrong with Mr. Hartman, and she was going to find out what it was. The next day, Lisa couldn't focus on anything. Her mind was consumed by thoughts of Mr. Hartman and the strange happenings around his house. Jack, ever the skeptic, seemed reluctant to follow through with their plan, but Lisa's persistence finally wore him down. "Well, look, but we're not trespassing," Jack warned. As the sun set and the neighborhood grew quiet, they made their way toward Hartman's house under the cover of darkness. Lisa carried a flashlight, and Jack had reluctantly grabbed a small crowbar just in case. The first thing they noticed was the backyard, an overgrown tangle of weeds and tall grass that seemed untouched for years. At the center of it was something unexpected, a rusted metal hatch partially obscured by vines. "What the hell is this?" Jack muttered, crouching down to inspect it. Lisa's heart pounded. The hatch looked ancient, its surface covered in strange, faded symbols. She reached out to touch it, but Jack stopped her. "Wait, let's think about this," he said. Before they could decide their next move, the sound of a door creaking open froze them in place. They turned to see Hartman stepping out onto his back porch, a lantern in one hand and something long and sharp in the other. A gardening tool, perhaps, or something worse. They ducked behind a cluster of bushes, holding their breath as Hartman scanned the yard. His lantern cast eerie, flickering shadows across the overgrown grass. For a moment, it seemed as though he had spotted them. But then he turned, walking slowly toward the hatch. Lisa and Jack exchanged a glance. Whatever was under that hatch, Hartman clearly didn't want anyone to find it. Once Hartman disappeared back into the house, they approached the hatch again. This time, Jack pried it open with the crowbar, revealing a narrow set of stairs descending into darkness. "This is insane," Jack whispered. "We shouldn't be doing this." "Then go back," Lisa said firmly, already climbing down. The air grew colder as they descended, and the stench hit them like a physical force, a mix of decay and dampness that made Lisa gag. The flashlight's beam revealed a long, narrow corridor lined with brick walls. At the end of the hallway was a heavy wooden door. Lisa hesitated, her hand on the door's handle. "What if he's hiding something horrible down here?" she asked. Jack shook his head. "We don't know that. Maybe it's just old junk. Let's look and get out of here." They pushed the door open together, and what they saw made their blood run cold. The room was a macabre shrine, its walls covered with photographs of people, smiling families, children playing, couples on vacations. Beneath the photos were shelves lined with personal items, watches, jewelry, and even toys. In the center of the room was a large table covered with tools, each one stained with something dark and crusted. Lisa's eyes locked on a pile of newspapers in one corner of the room. She picked one up, her hands trembling. The headline read, "Local woman missing, last seen in Maplewood Heights." "Jack," she whispered, holding up the paper. "These are all about missing people." Jack scanned the room, his face pale. "These aren't just clippings," he said, pointing to the shelves. These are their things. He's been keeping them." Lisa's stomach churned. They had stumbled into something far worse than she had imagined. But before they could process it, they heard footsteps echoing down the corridor. "He's coming," Lisa hissed, grabbing Jack's arm. They scrambled to hide behind a large cabinet as Hartman entered the room. He walked to the table, humming softly to himself as he picked up one of the tools. The sight of him, calm and methodical, sent shivers down Lisa's spine. Suddenly, Hartman froze, his head tilting slightly as though he had sensed their presence. "I know you're here," he said softly, his voice chillingly calm. "You shouldn't have come." Lisa's heart raced. She held her breath, praying he wouldn't find them. Hartman began walking slowly around the room, his lantern casting eerie shadows on the walls. "We need to get out of here," Jack mouthed silently. Lisa nodded, but there was only one way out, the same way they had come in, and Hartman was standing between them and the door. As he moved closer to their hiding spot, Lisa noticed something strange, a small trapdoor in the floor near the corner of the room. She tapped Jack's arm and pointed to it. Hartman paused, his lantern hovering dangerously close to their hiding spot. "You can't hide forever," he said, his voice dripping with menace. Lisa and Jack made their move. As Hartman turned away, they bolted for the trapdoor, pulling it open and slipping inside. The last thing Lisa saw before the trapdoor closed was Hartman's face, twisted into a horrifying smile. Lisa and Jack tumbled into the space beneath the trapdoor, landing in a cramped, pitch-black tunnel. The air was stifling and thick with the acrid smell of decay. Lisa's flashlight flickered ominously, casting jagged shadows on the narrow dirt walls. "Where are we?" Jack whispered, his voice trembling. Lisa shone the flashlight ahead, revealing a low, winding passage that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. Behind them, faint sounds of Hartman's heavy footsteps echoed through the room above. "We need to keep moving," Lisa said, her voice shaky but determined. They crawled through the tunnel, the dirt scraping against their hands and knees. The walls seemed to close the farther they went, and Lisa felt as though the earth itself was trying to suffocate them. Minutes passed like hours as they pushed forward, their breath shallow and rapid. The tunnel finally opened into a larger underground chamber. Lisa gasped at the sight before her. The chamber was a horrifying labyrinth of makeshift cages, each one filled with rotting bones and torn clothing. Chains dangled from the ceiling, and the walls were covered in crude carvings, symbols that seemed ancient and malevolent. In the center of the room stood a large pedestal, and atop it was a small wooden box. "What is this place?" Jack muttered, his eyes darting around the chamber. Lisa's hand shook as she approached the pedestal. The box seemed out of place, almost ordinary amidst the grotesque surroundings. She hesitated before opening it, half expecting something to jump out. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly. Lisa unfolded it and read the chilling message scrawled in blood-red ink. "Welcome to my game. Find your way out, if you can." Jack's face went pale. "He's playing with us." A sudden metallic clank echoed through the chamber, and they both turned to see a heavy gate slam shut behind them. A faint, mocking laugh reverberated through the air. "He's here," Lisa whispered. The room was suddenly plunged into darkness as Lisa's flashlight flickered and died. Panic surged through her chest. Jack grabbed her hand, pulling her forward. "We need to get out of here," he shouted. They stumbled blindly through the chamber, their movements frantic. Out of the darkness, a dim red glow began to illuminate the far side of the room. The glow emanated from another passage, its entrance marked by more of the strange, carved symbols. "This way," Lisa said, pulling Jack toward the passage. As they entered the corridor, the air grew colder. The walls were damp, and the sound of dripping water echoed around them. Lisa felt as though they were being watched, but each time she glanced back, there was nothing there. The passage twisted and turned, and soon they found themselves in another chamber. This one was smaller, but no less horrifying. The walls were lined with mirrors, each one cracked and stained. In the center of the room stood a chair, and strapped to it was a lifelike mannequin dressed in human clothing. "What the hell is this?" Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lisa turned back to see the house behind them engulfed in darkness, its windows like empty eyes staring out at them. She could have sworn she saw Hartman standing in one of them, his face a shadowy silhouette. Jack pulled her to her feet. "We need to get to the police," he said. But Lisa couldn't move. She could still hear his voice, cold and mocking, echoing in her ears. "You can't escape me." Lisa and Jack stumbled away from the house, the cool night air stinging their lungs as they tried to put as much distance as possible between them and the nightmare they had just escaped. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle of the wind a whisper of pursuit. "We need to find help," Jack said, his voice trembling but determined. Lisa nodded, clutching the flashlight that now barely flickered. The dirt road stretched endlessly in both directions, illuminated only by the pale glow of the moon. They decided to head toward the town they had passed earlier, praying someone would be awake to help. As they walked, a deep sense of unease settled over them. The night was unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that presses against the ears and suffocates the spirit. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, stopping in her tracks. Jack turned, his eyes scanning the darkness. At first, there was nothing. Then, faintly, they heard it. The crunch of footsteps on gravel, slow and deliberate. "He's following us," Lisa said, her voice barely audible. Panic surged as they broke into a run, the sound of footsteps growing louder behind them. The flashlight flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows that seemed to stretch and twist like claws reaching for them. "Over there," Jack shouted, pointing to a small wooden cabin just off the road. It looked abandoned, but it was their only hope. They sprinted to the cabin and threw open the door, slamming it shut behind them. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of rot lingered. Jack barricaded the door with an old chair while Lisa searched the room for anything they could use as a weapon. "Do you think he saw us?" Lisa asked, her voice shaking. Jack didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the single window, his knuckles white as he gripped the crowbar they had taken from Hartman's house. Minutes passed in tense silence. Just as they began to believe they were safe, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed outside the cabin. A slow, deliberate knock came at the door. "Lisa." "Jack." Hartman's voice was calm, almost playful. "You can't hide from me." Lisa's heart pounded in her chest as she motioned for Jack to stay quiet. They backed away from the door, their breath shallow and ragged. The knock came again, harder this time. The door rattled on its hinges, and the chair wedged against it began to creak. "We have to fight," Jack whispered, his voice steady despite the terror in his eyes. Lisa nodded, gripping a rusty hammer she had found in the corner of the room. They stood side by side, waiting as the door buckled under Hartman's weight. With a deafening crash, the door splintered, and Hartman stepped inside. His face was twisted into a grotesque grin, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You didn't think it would be that easy, did you?" he said, his voice dripping with mockery. Jack lunged forward, swinging the crowbar with all his strength. Hartman dodged effortlessly, grabbing Jack by the throat and lifting him off the ground. Lisa screamed, rushing forward with the hammer, but Hartman flung Jack aside like a rag doll. Lisa swung the hammer, striking Hartman's arm. He roared in pain, releasing Jack, who collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. Hartman turned his attention to Lisa, his expression darkening. "You'll regret that," he growled. Suddenly, Lisa's eyes landed on a can of kerosene in the corner of the room. Without thinking, she grabbed it and doused Hartman in the flammable liquid. "Jack, the matches!" she shouted. Jack, still struggling to breathe, fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a box of matches they had taken from their house. He struck one, the tiny flame flickering in the darkness. "Do it!" Lisa screamed as Hartman lunged toward her. Jack threw the match, and Hartman erupted into flames. His screams were inhuman, echoing through the cabin as the fire consumed him. "Run!" Lisa yelled, grabbing Jack's arm. They bolted out of the cabin as the flames spread, engulfing the structure in a blazing inferno. They didn't stop running until they reached the main road, their lungs burning and their legs trembling. In the distance, they watched as the cabin collapsed, the fire reducing it to ash. But their relief was short-lived. Lisa turned to Jack, her eyes wide with terror. "Do you hear that?" From the shadows came a faint, mocking laugh. It was Hartman's voice, cold and hollow, echoing through the night. "You can't escape me," the voice whispered. Lisa and Jack stood frozen, the realization sinking in. Hartman wasn't gone. He never would be.